All right, guys, we do have some pretty significant stadium news that I wanted to speculate on a little bit here. The Cleveland Browns, their stadium saga appears to be reaching a boiling point. We have a potential $1 billion stadium renovation. Now remember, the original thought was maybe the Browns will just build a new stadium altogether. This renovation is kind of shocking to me. If you're going to go with a $1 billion renovation that apparently doesn't even include a roof, that's a lot of money, and my thought is probably the surrounding area is going to get a huge renovation, just like they had kind of released some possible renderings of it a few years ago. But if you're going with $1 billion, there will also probably be a complete redesign, or at least a partial redesign, of the interior of the stadium. And it says new reports stadium plans could have Browns playing elsewhere for multiple seasons. So if that is true and the Browns are going to have to play somewhere else, I know there's been speculation maybe they go play at Ohio Stadium, although that doesn't seem likely. Maybe they play in Canton. To me, that's the most likely. Kind of reminds me of the San Diego Chargers becoming the LA Chargers. You had SoFi Stadium not ready, so they played at that very small soccer stadium for a few years that sat like 20 or 30,000. That would be kind of a comparable situation to the Browns playing in Canton. There's really no other locations I can think of in Cleveland. You know, people were saying maybe Progressive Field. I mean, that would just be ridiculous. It would be hilarious. Honestly, I would love to see it, but that is not an option. Apparently, the Haslams have been outspoken about developing the lakefront, but have also stated a dome is unlikely. That is the big news. You're spending $1 billion, but you're not even putting a dome in. And I honestly thought Haslam really wanted a dome to host events throughout the year. The report also states the Browns would need to find somewhere new to play for 2 years during construction. And then there is speculation the Browns could play in the new Columbus Crew Stadium due to ownership of that franchise being owned by the Haslam Group. But then we got reports today saying, no, they're not going to be playing in Columbus. It's too far from Cleveland. But if this is true and they do need to spend multiple years at a new, place while the stadium gets rebuilt, basically, this seems like a major renovation. I mean, $1 billion. Think about this. The Rogers Center gets a $300 million renovation, and they changed a lot in that stadium. Times that by 3. And that's what the Browns would be doing. Now, some of that money would be, actually a lot of that money would be spent on the exterior of it, but still, you would have to think this stadium is going to be completely redesigned, at least part of it, and it says construction possibly could begin in 2026. Browns and the city had disagreed about building a new stadium, which could have cost $2 or $3 billion. I mean, listen, $2 or $3 billion, you're getting into the super stadium range if that's what it costs. Think about Allegiant Stadium in Vegas costing 1.9. You know, you've got the Bills' new stadium. It's not, I think it's like 1.6 or something like that. So that's very expensive. Instead, they will undertake a $1 billion renovation of the existing structure that will also include a relocated Shoreway Freeway that cuts off access to the stadium area from downtown Cleveland, and a land bridge across a set of railroad tracks that will include parking and real estate development opportunities. So a lot of stuff seems to be happening around the stadium, the development of the stadium. That's where a lot of this money is going. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to go into connecting downtown. The Browns' lease expires in 2028, but the stadium is starting the construction once again in 2026, which will continue for 2 or 3 years. So we don't know the exact time frame, but it's looking like 2026 and 2027 the Browns will be playing somewhere else During that time, the Browns could be displaced from Cleveland, with Ohio Stadium being pitched as a temporary venue. We do have, again, a report saying that's not going to happen. What is my take on Ohio Stadium hosting NFL games? I think it would be cool. But, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. It almost would get me to wonder, would they even be able to fill it? You got to remember, Ohio Stadium seats 104,000. That's a lot of people. You know, if you're talking about 9 home games, I'm sure they would sell out at least the first 4 or 5 because it's a spectacle. But if the Browns, you know, it's just an interesting situation. It would really be a mind warp to see NFL action happening at Ohio Stadium. I'll say that. The rebuilt stadium is not expected to include a dome or a retractable roof. So they're saying they might just completely rebuild it and change the entire thing. Wow. And then they say, no, it's not going to have a roof, citing engineering difficulties based on the former Lake Erie shoreline landfill that the stadium is constructed atop of. And that makes sense because originally it seemed like the Browns' plan was to move to a different area in Cleveland and build a dome, but if they're staying there, they cannot build a roof because apparently the land does not support it. So that is the recent stuff, and then we did have this come out today. There is no merit to the report that the team would play home games in Columbus during the renovation. It is believed that the Browns owners would never consider taking the team out of Cleveland and making the fans travel for home games, which kind of puts it into a weird spot. I don't know where they would play at. News 3 has determined that there is no merit to the report that the Browns would play any games outside of Cleveland. We have checked out all sources, including in Columbus with Ohio State and with the Browns. It is believed that the Browns under the Haslam ownership group would never consider taking the team out of Cleveland and forcing the fan base to move for multiple years. The places the Browns could play, however, is limited in the area. Could they share a field with Baldwin Wallace or John Carroll? No, to me, that's not an option. That's not an NFL level. It's not even close. Progressive Field would be off limits given the timing of the two sports. Not technically, no. That's not why Progressive Field would be off limits. If you guys remember, I mean, there's been several multi-purpose NFL, NFL, MLB, even just the Oakland Coliseum where, you know, when the Raiders had home games on Saturday in September, the Athletics would just be away. So that's not the reason Progressive Field wouldn't work. I think there'd be big concerns about Progressive Field really just not fitting in terms of an NFL field. It's not a multi-purpose stadium. It would be ridiculous. And it also only seats 34,000, but I guess that would be better than Baldwin Wallace or John Carroll. You also have to consider they'd probably have to put in a complete new turf, grass type field or something. Otherwise, it would just get completely ripped up. The current stuff that they have there. Playing at the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, however, may be their best option. So that's why this article makes no sense. This article cites sources that says they would never take them out of Cleveland, and then one paragraph later, it says, oh, but Canton makes the most sense. I do agree. I think Canton makes the most sense for the Browns. You know, kind of a situation like San Diego moving to LA and playing in that very small soccer stadium. It would be very similar to that. But this is a situation, if it's going to take 2 or 3 years, it is a huge, complete overhaul, and it's probably going to change the stadium and the overall look of it, and especially of the exterior look of it. So we will see what happens with that. When it comes to potential renderings, maybe next week there's supposed to be a big announcement I heard about the Browns. We might get some huge future renderings on the Browns rebuilt stadium and the Lakeshore development. And then we do have this. It says car dealer says he's building a $2 billion NHL arena project 30 miles north of Atlanta, and there are renderings to this, possibly trying to attract an NHL team to Atlanta. You're not going to make that type of investment. A $2 billion arena, especially for NHL, seems ridiculous. I think the newest one cost $1 billion. $2 billion for an NHL arena, that's not going to happen. So I don't know what's going on with that project, but I did see it, and there are actual renderings possibly to try and draw an NHL team back. But when it comes to the Browns, we'll have to see if the renderings get leaked. I think the most logical spot for the Browns in 2026 would be Canton. It just seems obvious. I don't see them somehow trying to play at Progressive Field. I mean, that would kind of ruin the field overall. But we will see. Either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.